Again, everyone, today we will be discussing the first topic of the research in daily life, which is the nature and tools of research. So, pinatanong ko kayo no last meeting, kung meron na ba kayo na-conduct na research or are you familiar with some strategies as well as methodologies when we talk about research? Okay. Halimbawa, tinanong ko kayo, ano yung research title ninyo nung kayo ay nag-grade 11? O kaya naman, ano yung mga naging research title ninyo kung nung kayo ay nag-high school. Okay, so these are the important things we want to know in order for us to gauge saan ba tayo papunta, ano ba yung mga natutunan natin. Okay? So ano bang ginawa ninyo nung nag-research kayo? Okay, let's say for example, nung nag-research po kami, sir, inutusan po kami ni teacher to do this format. Okay na po, sir, gumawa po kami ng Google form po noon. Tapos we gathered information, we gathered data coming from different respondents, let's say for example. So we will talk about this process and procedures from time to time. And of course, from now, let's just discuss the nature and what tools we use in the research. Okay, so this file right here is uploaded in your Google Classroom. So you can just browse it from time to time. So what are the learning outcomes for this chapter? So first, we have to distinguish between a common uses of the term research that reflect misconceptions about what the research involves. So the true nature of the research in academic setting. So gaya na rin bawa, meron tayo research subject. This is the research in daily life. Ano ba yung mga tools and methodologies that we will use? We will try to describe the cyclical as well as iterative nature of research, including the steps that are genuine research project involves. We also want to distinguish among positivism, post-positivism, constructivism, pragmatism, or realism as philosophical underpinnings of a research project. No? Meron pala tayong mga philosophical perspectives. Bakit natin gusto mag-research? Okay, so these are based on these three factors, possibly the positivism, post-positivism, as well as constructivism. We also want to identify examples of how 6 general research tools can play significant roles in research projects such as the library and resources. Meron ba dito mahilig pumunta sa library? Let's say, for example, sir, ako po mahilig po akong magbasa. So possible that you want to use the resources like our books or the references books that have uploaded. Okay, let's say for example, you want to use computer technology, yung mga PDF file natin. Okay, we also want to measure ano ba yung mga data o yung mga datos na nakuha natin, paano natin sila ini-interpret. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng ganitong level? Ano bang ibig sabihin ng ganyan level? Okay. So these are the tools. Now, we also have statistics. Oh, may naka-encounter ba dito? Halimbawa, pinagbilang kayo, pinagamit kayo ng Excel, pinagamit kayo ng frequency, percentage, mean o yung average na tinatawag. Familiar ba kayo sa mga ganun? Sir, binilang po namin kung ilan po yung estudyante na sumagot po ng ganito. Sir, binilang po namin kung ano po yung average po ng grupo po na pinag-uusapan namin. O kaya naman sir, gumamit po kami ng mean o yung weighted mean na tinatawag. So these are the statistics na tinatawag. Naalala ninyo, binigyan ko kayo ng assignment tungkol sa pagkakaiba ng descriptive, correlational, at experimental research. Naalala ninyo, yung pina-upload natin. Nasagot ninyo dun sa video natin. Okay? Sino makapagbibigay sa akin ng example? Ano ang pagkakaiba ng tatlong ito? Kung naalala pa ninyo yung assignment ninyo. Sige, this is additional points for you. Meron po ba? Yung naalala lang ninyo. Sir, ang naalala ko po, kahit isa lang sa mga yon, ang pagkakaalala ko po sa descriptive ay ganito. O kaya naman po, sir, ang pagkakaalala ko po sa correlational ay ganito. O kaya ang pagkakaalala ko po sa experimental ay ganito. So you can respond na lang siguro sa ating in-call messages kung nahihiya kayo, let's say for example. So ilagay ninyo dyan para mabigyan ko kayo ng points this morning. Ano ang pagkakaiba ng descriptive, correlational, at experimental research? O yan, additional points yan para sa inyo. So, habang nagdi-discuss tayo, proceed lang kayo sa pagsagot. So, language as well as the human mind. Pag-usapan natin yung mga yan. And lastly, you also have to describe the steps you might take to explore research in your field. Ano bang gagawin natin para masagutan natin yung mga pinapasagot sa atin ni Sir na research? O kaya yung research proposal na sinasabi ni Sir. Ano ba natin gagawin yung mga yan? Okay? Huwag kayong mahiya kung gusto niyo sumagot ng isang beses, pangalawang beses, pangatlong beses. Tuloy-tuloy lang kayo sa pagsagot as long as you will respond to these questions, additional points for your recitation this morning. Okay? So what research is not? Ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng research? Ang research daw is not merely gathering information. Hindi yan yung mangungulekta ka lang ng mga impormasyon. Hindi lang yan yung mangungulekta ka lang ng mga datos. Tapos wala ka nang gagawin doon sa datos na yun. So research is not merely rummaging around for hard to locate information. Hindi yan yung para kang lost wanderer. Parang gusto mo sagutan yung pinakamahirap na tanong. Yan. So hindi yan yun. So we have step-by-step procedures on how we will come up to this kind of research problem. So from time to time, researchers tend to collaborate to one another. They try to cite, they try to gather information from different perspectives. Halimbawa, sa Sardonis, I want to research on something that also existing na problema na rin. So possible that I want to contribute to this kind of field of expertise. Like for example, bakit kaya ang mga estudyante ay merong mataas na drive to pursue their degree? Ayan. Gusto nila makapagtapos ng pag-aaral. I want to know the factors involved. So ngayon gagamit ako halimbawa ng research tools o gagamit ako ng mga survey form. So for us to know what are the characteristics of these individuals? Ano ba yung mga characteristics ng mga to? Bakit kailangan nila makapagtapos ng pag-aaral? Siguro, sir, siguro po itong mga to, they want to please their parents. Siguro po meron pong reward na naghihintay sa kanila. O kaya naman, sir, kaya po siguro gusto nila makapagtapos ng pag-aaral kasi po gusto nila magtrabaho eventually. Okay, these are the things possible that are factors involved. Why is that our students are very motivated to pursue their degree or to pursue their learnings. Okay, so research is not merely transporting facts from one location to another. So research is a systematic process. Take note of this one. It is also included in our quiz. Okay, research is a systematic process of collecting. Nangongolekta ka ng mga datos, nagpapasurvey ka, pinapasagutan mo sila dun sa survey form mo dun sa Google form. O kaya naman Survey Monkey. Ano pa yung ginamit ninyo nung nung senior high school kayo ng grade 11? Sino gumamit dito ng Google form? Sir, ako po, pinagamit po kami ng Google form. Kami pa po yung nag-edit po ng mga responses po doon. So kung sino po dapat yung sumagot, ano po yung mga characteristic o yung demographic profile po. Yan, lagay nyo yan sa natin, sa in-call messages natin. Anong pinagawa sa inyo para kayo ay makapag-kolekta ng mga datos? O kaya naman, sir, pinag-interview po kami. Meron ba kayong klase noon na kung saan you are required to interview a person or interview a certain group of individuals so you can gather this data? Meron bang pinagawa sa inyo noon? Halimbawa, si Angelica, Anong pinagawa sa inyo, Angelica, let's say, for example? Anong pinagawa sa inyo, Angelica?
Yung kay Sir Kim po na pinagawa niya din po kami ng Google Forms, tas po pina-interview sa 20 persons. About din po yun sa sa school din po, tas sa Strand ata yun.
Okay, let's say, for example, Angelica and group members want to know the characteristics of individuals in the senior high school program of PT sila, for example. Ngayon, gagamit daw halimbawa sila Angelica ng survey form to collect ano ba talaga ang gusto ng mga estudyante na ito. Halimbawa, gusto natin malaman ano ba yung vocation, ano ba yung course na pinoproject ng mga estudyante natin. Kapag ba YUMS, ano ba gusto nilang kunin? Let's say, for example, you want to take psychology, you want to take political science, you want to take criminology, so on and so forth. Kapag ba ABM, ano bang gustong kunin ng mga estudyante? Gusto ba nila ng Gusto ba nila ng accountancy? Gusto ba nila ng business? Gusto ba nila ng management o kaya business management courses? Kapag ba sinabi ng ICT, necessary ba na gusto rin nila ng computer programming o kaya naman ng IT program? So these things that we want to evaluate are based on our assumptions na ito yung mga gusto ng mga estudyante natin. Okay? Systematic, ibig sabihin, ina-analyze muna natin ano yung itatanong natin. Hindi yan pwede yung pagpunta mo dun sa field. O kaya naman, nagpa-survey ka. Kung ano-anong tanong yung mga gusto mong itanong sa mga estudyante o dun sa mga respondents or target respondent mo. Okay? So possible na baka insensitive yung tanong mo o kaya it doesn't make sense with your data that you want to gather. That's for example, hindi siguro tugma yung mga question na pinormulate mo doon sa gusto mong answeran, doon sa objective mo o kaya sa research question mo. Okay? Pag sinabi natin research question, you want to answer that question, di ba? Halimbawa, baka pag tinanong ka kung anong pangalan mo, tapos ang sinagot mo, age, tapos kung saan ka nakatira, yan, tama ba na yun ang sagot mo? Hindi. Kasi iba yung responses, iba yung halimbawa, iba naman yung responses ng estudyante. Yan, gusto mo halimbawa malaman kung anong strand niya. Pero ang nilagay mo doon, mga kurso. So, mga kurso ng pang-college. So, hindi ito strand halimbawa. O, give kayo ng example. Ano yung mga nakaka-relate kayo dito na mga na paggawa ng survey form o ng mga survey questionnaires ninyo? Ano mga ginawa ninyo noon? So try to respond in our info messages para tuloy-tuloy lang tayo. Sir, kami po, pina-check po muna namin yung survey form po namin kung tama po ba. O kaya sir, kami po, gumamit po kami ng standardized tool. Ibig sabihin ng standardized tool, these are materials being standardized or they have psychometric properties in order for us to interpret the data gathered. And these tools or research tools are had undergone several studies already. Okay, let's say for example, gumamit kayo ng survey questionnaire na standardized. Ito yung mga naka-upload na dun sa mga journals, okay, mga research journals or mga articles that we want to use them to gather our information. So less likely we will not alter the information doon. O kaya as is na, yun yung gagamitin natin. So halimbawa kayo, nagpa-validate pa kayo ng questionnaires, pinatanong nyo muna kayo, sir, tama po ba yung mga question namin dito? Sir, you are trying to collect these information or data coming from your target respondents. We also have to analyze this data. O pag sinabi natin analyze, no, iintindihin natin. Ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng mga numbers na ito? Ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng mga bagay na sinasabi dito sa survey questionnaire natin? Halimbawa, you want to know the 5 personality factors of individuals. We have extraversion, agreeableness, openness to experience, neuroticism, agreeableness, let's say for example. These are things, halimbawa. So, ocean ang tawag doon. Ngayon, itong 5 factors na ito, okay, we want to interpret saan ba sila mataas. Let's say, for example, gusto mong hanapin yung average. Saan sila mataas? Sir, mataas po sila sa extraversion. Siguro sila po ay mga palakaibigan o kaya nang po kapag tinanong sila ng introduce yourselves o kaya pagka sinabi sa kanila introduce yourselves, sasabihin po nila agad kung ano yung response po nila. So, with that individuals or in a group, let's say for example. Okay naman sir, mataas din po yung agreeableness nila. Tapos po mababa po yung neuroticism nila. So, you want to describe, you want to analyze and interpret this data. O kaya naman, halimbawa, gusto niyo malaman yung demographic profile ng mga estudyante natin. Ngayon, nakita mo na mataas yung kanilang levels towards this kind of age. Halimbawa, mataas yung bracket ng 25 to 30 years old. O kaya naman, mataas yung 18 years old to 24 years old. So ngayon, nagkakaroon ka na ng interpretation and you're now analyzing na ang mga estudyante pala natin ay nasa bracket ng 18 to 24 years old. Let's say, for example. So ito yung ibig sabihin, you're trying to analyze. Bakit kaya 18 to 24 years old ang pumapasok dito? Siguro, pagkatapos nila ng senior high school nila, dumiretso na agad sila ng tinatawag natin na college, let's say for example, ganon. O kaya naman, bakit kaya ang mga taga-PTC, marami dito yung mga taga-Taguig, Makati, o kaya naman marami dito yung mga taga-Pateros, pwedeng ganon. O kaya naman malapit dito yung, ano pa ba malapit na municipality dito? Taguig, Rizal, ano pa ba? So let's say for example, marami dito ang mga taga-Pateros kasi yung Pateros mas accessible siya sa mga estudyante rito. Nag-gets mo ba? We are trying to interpret ano bang ibig sabihin ng mga datos na nakuha natin. O kaya halimbawa, napansin natin na yung mga estudyante natin nag-exhibit ng anxiety kapag sila ay pumapasok. Kung sinabi natin anxiety, nababalisa, o kaya naman hindi nila alam yung gagawin nila, o kaya hindi nila sure bakit sila nandito, so on and so forth. Now, you try to explore their anxiety level. Bakit kaya sila na-anxious towards this experience of going to school? So possible that you want to use psychometric tests. That possible you want to use questionnaires that are standardized to measure what are the factors or reason bakit sila kinakabahan. Halimbawa, sir, siguro kinakabahan sila dahil kulang po yung materials po nila. Siguro sir, kinakabahan sila dahil kulang po yung tools nila for online classes. Siguro po sir, kinakabahan po sila dahil kulang po yung knowledge po nila towards the subject. Sir, siguro po kaya po sila kinakabahan kasi baka terror po yung mga teacher. So you want to measure them based on the standardized tool o kaya naman yung self-made tool ninyo. Gusto ninyo malaman bakit kinakabahan ng mga estudyante na ito. So now you are interpreting it. And you want to know, ikaw lang ba yung naka-obserba ng ganitong datos? Okay? So, halimbawa, there are also articles, there are also research materials that also interpret bakit kinakabahan ng mga estudyante kahit na hindi sa Pilipinas, kahit na hindi sa Metro Manila, kahit hindi sa Pateros. Ano to? Universal itong experience na ito. Possible na magkakaroon ka ngayon ng related literature o yung review of related literature. Na-gets ba ninyo? Halimbawa, sinabi ni Sir Donnie sa ganitong study niya. Ayan. Ngayon, pinapatunayan ng resulta namin na ito ay related to one another. Okay? So, ginagawa natin ng strong basis yung result natin based on the findings of other researchers as well. So, we want to accept as well na hindi original in a way yung resulta natin na pwede na maging tawag dito maging tool yung ating study to interpret the natural behaviors of student. Bakit sila kinakabahan pag sila ay pumapasok? Nakukuha ba ninyo anong ibig natin sabihin sa pag-re-research, no? So data in order to increase our understanding of phenomenon about which are interested or concerned. Yan. Halimbawa, concerned ka, bakit kaya marami ang nagda-drop out? Bakit kaya marami mga estudyante ang naglilipatan ng school? Yan. So ngayon gusto mo silang tanungin during the exit interview. Yan. Halimbawa, may naka-experience naman ng exit interview dito. Nung high school kayo, bakit, ano ba yung mga tinatanong sa inyo? Let's say, for example, bakit ka lilipat ng school? Halimbawa, sir, siguro po nabully po ako. Siguro po, sir, ano po ako, itong mga teacher ko po ay mga terror. Siguro po, sir, yung mga classmate ko po, hindi po nila ako pinapansin. O kaya naman siguro po, sir, I think the environment does not fit my interest. Pwede ka na naman. So there are several factors that we want to measure. And of course, we want to assume. Gusto natin palitin yung problema natin. Dahil for example, no, palitin natin yung problema natin in a way na huwag natin pasabugin. Na sobrang natin gustong daming tanungin, sobrang natin gustong daming explore sa study natin. We want to narrow it down. Halimbawa, gusto ninyong alamin yung bakit kinakabahan ng mga estudyante kapag sila ay pumapasok. Siguro pwede ninyong kuhanin yung factors with family implication of family relations, pwedeng ganon. So, gusto niyo malaman kung meron bang relasyon yung pagiging kabado ng estudyante kapag siya pumapasok in terms of family relationships. Gusto niyo malaman ganon. Ngayon, specific lang sa family relationships, hindi mo natatanungin kung siya ba ay nabubuli sa school, hindi mo natatanungin kung siya ba ay merong sakit, hindi mo natatanungin kung siya ba ay hindi pinapansin ni teacher, hindi mo natatanungin kung siya ay may problema sa teacher niya, so on and so forth. You want to narrow it down para hindi nasabog yung data natin. And of course, we want to explore certain phenomenon lang. So ngayon, magkakaroon tayo ng idea na okay, ganun pala ang research, hindi pala yun yung lahat sinasagot natin. Nahunawaan ba natin na kapag minsan, di ba, pag nagpo-propose tayo ng study, kapag we are trying to analyze na, no, biglang, ba't parang ang daming problema ba't ang daming problema ng research ko? Kasi, ang dami mong gustong sagutin. Okay? Kapag nagkakaroon tayo ng research, try to narrow your problem. Parang sumisilip ka sa microscope, no? Pag nakita mo halimbawa yung langgam, pag nakita mo yung langgam, nakita mo siya sa langgam, parang ang link lang niya, di ba? Pero kapag tiningnan mo siya sa microscope, mas nagiging specific yung ano yung structure niya, ano yung anatomy niya, yan. Ano yung pagkakagawa doon sa langgam na yun. Parang research din yan. Mas nagiging malinaw sa atin yung problema kapag we are trying to specify, we are trying to focus ano yung gusto nating pag-aralan. So gaya yan halimbawa, binigyan ko kayo ng mga topic. So hindi na kalat yung research agenda natin. Hindi na iba-iba yung topic natin. So para hindi na tayo magkagulo halimbawa sa interpretation of data. So likely magkakaroon na kayo ng collaboration. Ay, ganito rin pala yung mga nabasa mo na research, ganito rin pala yung nabasa mo ng mga problema, ganito rin pala yung nabasa mo ng mga journal. So magkakaroon kayo ng ideas sa mga yan. Okay, so people often use a systematic approach when they collect and interpret for information to solve small problems of daily living. Kaya halimbawa, no, sumasagot kayo ng mga problema sa pang-araw-araw ninyo. So gaya ng pang-araw-araw natin pamumuhay, ano ba yung mga madalas nating sinasagot na problema natin? Halimbawa, walang pagkain. O sinong bibili ng almusal natin? O ngayon, you're trying to explore sino ba ang may capability para sila yung makabili. O sino ba yung may capability to explore saan pupunta ng tindahan? Sino ba yung nakakaalam na pupunta ng tindahan? Kasi for example, ganyan. O kaya naman, bago kayo sa isang community, bago kayo sa isang lugar, bago kayo sa isang bahay, now you want to know, sino ba ang bibili sa atin ng ulam? Yung bisita ba o yung taga doon niya? So kayo sumagot. Siyempre, yung nakakaalam ng problema. Yan. So nakakaalam ng problema, halimbawa, ikaw yung taga roon. So you want to know, saan ba yung tindahan? Saan ba yung pinakamura na bibilan dito? Okay? So researcher begins with a problem and an answered question. Let's say, for example, there are gaps that involved in a study. Pag sinabi natin gaps, siguro na-miss yun. O kaya naman, siguro, problema yun na hindi pa nasasagot ng researcher. So, likely nasa recommendation siya. Di ba pag nagbabasa tayo ng mga research, merong mga recommendation doon. So, possible that you want to explore these factors. Again, these things we want to explore are unanswered question. O kaya naman, gusto ninyo malaman kung ito bang question na ito is valid. Halimbawa, kinokontra mo yung proposal na ang mga estudyante kaya kinakabahan dahil sa family relations nila. Pero ikaw, hindi ka naniniwala doon sa point na yon o kaya doon sa study na yon. Siguro, ang assumption mo is that kaya kinakabahan ng estudyante dahil sa experience niya sa loob, hindi dahil sa pamilya niya. Sino ang estudyante dito na kinakabahan dahil sa teacher nila? Meron ba? Kaya siguro sabihin natin gano'n. O kaya, sino dito yung kinakabahan dahil wala silang assignment? O meron bang gano'n dito? O possible we have different point of view. Again, these things that we want to research or we want to explore are things that are unanswered or possible that have answered, pero we have in contrast doon sa point of view na yun. Again, the researcher clearly and specifically articulates the goal of the research endeavor. Okay, pag sinabi natin research, meron tayong mga specific question that we want to answer. Let's say, for example, you want to know the demographic profile ng mga estudyante involved in a study. Now, you want to know specifically ano yung sex nila, ano yung gender nila, let's say, for example, ano yung age nila, saan ba sila nakatira, okay, so ano ba yung kurso nila, let's say, for example, ano yung strand nila, so on and so forth. So, ito yung mga demographic profile. Sinabi natin demographic profile, these are the basic information about your respondents. Ayun yung mga tinatanong natin na ilang taon na sila, saan sila nakatira, nagtatrabaho ba sila, hindi, employed, unemployed, single, married, mga ganyan. The researcher clearly and specifically articulates the goal of the research endeavor. So aside from the demographic profile, ano pa yung gusto mong explore? You want to explore likely the life satisfaction of an individual. So gusto mong malaman kung ano ba yung mga factors involved in the life satisfaction. Okay? Pag sinabi natin life satisfaction, there is no universal truth about life satisfaction. Okay? Pag sinabi natin no universal truth, merong mga tools, merong mga researchers, merong mga studies, merong mga journals, or other references that define life satisfaction in different ways. O sige nga kayo, pag tinanong ko kayo, anong ibig sabihin ng pagmamahal? Okay. Kung tinanong kayo ibig sabihin ng pagmamahal, anong ibig sabihin para sa inyo? O sige. Sir, ako po, ang ibig sabihin po ng pagmamahal para sa akin ay pagmamahal ng mga magulang, pagmamahal po ng mga kapatid, pagmamahal po ng mga kaibigan ko po, so on and so forth. Sir, ako po, ang pagmamahal para sa akin ay yung pagmamahal ng asawa, pagmamahal ng spouse, pagmamahal po ng girlfriend, boyfriend. So magkakaiba tayo, anong ibig sabihin ng pagmamahal? Tama ba? So likely, gaya ng sa research, meron tayong iba't ibang factors involved in a certain factor o yung certain variable. So gaya ng life satisfaction, halimbawa, siguro, ang life satisfaction depends on the target respondents. Let's say, for example, life satisfaction of what? Life satisfaction of students. Siguro iba yung life satisfaction nila kapag sinabi natin na life satisfaction ng mga teachers, life satisfaction ng mga magulang, so on and so forth. Naunawaan ba natin? So again, we have to articulate our goal. Sino ba yung target respondent natin? Sila ba ay mga estudyante? Sila ba ay mga guro? Sila ba ay mga teenager? Sila ba ay mga matatanda? O yan. So magkakaroon kayo ng idea na, iba pala ang life satisfaction ng mga estudyante versus mga teachers. Kaya siguro nagkakaroon sila ng conflict minsan. So possible that is one of your research question, that what are the life satisfaction of students, of UMS students. Siguro, magkaiba yung life satisfaction ng UMS student. Iba naman yung life satisfaction ng ICT students with ABM students and GAS students. No? So, nasa inyo kung anong gusto ninyong i-research. And again, we have to narrow the research question. We have to specifically identify what are the factors involved in that research. Okay? Okay. So the researcher often divides the principal problem into more manageable sub-problems. Meron kang problema, tapos pinaparte-parte mo siya. Halimbawa, pag sinabi natin life satisfaction ng mga students o mga teenager, gumagamit ka ngayon ng psychometric tool or standardized test. Doon sa standardized test na yun, sinasagot niya yung life satisfaction at large. Pero sabihin natin, yung standardized tool na yun ay merong sub-problem. Meron siyang mga sub-factors involved. Kapag ba sinabi natin life satisfaction of a student, what are the things involved with that problem? Pwede siguro life satisfaction in terms of their parents. Pwede siguro life satisfaction in terms of schooling. Life satisfaction in terms of relationships, pwedeng ganun. O kaya, life satisfaction in terms of physiological needs, pwedeng ganun. So, depende dun sa psychometric tools. And of course, we have to know the sub-problems. Ano ba yung mga problema involved with that problem? Ngayon, again, we want to explore really, ano ba yung tool na gagamitin natin? Pag-usapan natin mamaya. The researcher identifies the hypotheses and assumptions that underlie the research. Okay, pag sinabi nating hypothesis, ito yung ina-identify natin na problema. Meron bang relasyon yung pagiging extroverted sa pagiging palakaibigan o friendliness? Extroverted and friendliness. You want to know the relationship between the two. Ngayon, your hypothesis or your null hypothesis, pag sinabi nating null hypothesis, ito yung gusto nating i-debunk. Halimbawa, there is no significant relationship between the life satisfaction, between the extraversion and friendliness of UMS student. Ito yung gusto natin i-debunk. The researcher identifies the hypothesis assumptions that underlie the research. Pag-usapan natin, ano ang hypothesis? So, hypothesis, a logical supposition, a reasonable guess. Yan. Meron kang hula, pero reasonable ito. Educated guess ito. Nanguhula ka, pero pag-aaralan mo. Yan. Educated guess conjecture. So, it provides a tentative explanation Ito yung tingin mo sa phenomenon na ito. Merong relasyon ang pagiging extroverted sa pagiging palakaibigan. Yan. Ngayon, you want to investigate. Totoo ba na kapag mataas ang extroversion, mataas din ang pagiging friendliness o pagiging palakaibigan? So it may direct your thinking to possible sources of information that will aid in resolving one subproblems, and the result may also help you to resolve the principal research problem. Ngayon, gumamit ka ngayon ng survey form, gumamit ka ngayon ng psychometric tool, gumamit ka ng mga tools to know these factors involved, yung extraversion as well as friendliness mo. Okay, you want to know kung ito ba ay may relasyon talaga. So, ang null hypothesis mo dito, there is no significant relationship between the two variables involved. Pag sinabi naman natin alternative hypothesis, ito yung hula mo talaga na meron talagang relasyon. There is a significant relationship between the two variables. Let's say, for example, ano naman ang ibig sabihin ng assumption? Assumption is a condition that is taken for granted without which the research project would be pointless. Halimbawa, wala kang assumption. So, bakit pa natin pinag-aaralan? Ito, kailangan meron kang assumptions. Ano ba ang ibig sabihin sa'yo ng extraversion? Ano bang ibig sabihin sa'yo ng friendliness? Ano bang ibig sabihin sa'yo ng life satisfaction? So, careful researchers, certainly those conducting research in an academic environment, set forth a statement of their assumptions as the bedrock upon which their study rests. Halimbawa, nagbasa ka ngayon ng mga studies, nagbasa ka ng mga research journals, nagbasa ka ng mga articles involving your study. Let's say, for example, you have now an assumption na kapag ang mga estudyante ay mataas ang extraversion, likely sila ay merong mataas din ng friendliness. Okay? Ito yung mga assumption natin. Kapag sinabi naman ng ating hypothesis, ito yung hula natin. Siguro, meron tayong relasyon na ang pag mataas ang extraversion, mataas din ang kanilang friendliness. What researches again? So the researcher develops a specific plan. Nagpaplano kayo, ano bang gagawin natin? Paano natin kukunin yung mga respondent natin? Paano natin kukunin yung mga datos natin for addressing the problem and its subproblems? Sir, halimbawa po, kapag po nagpa-survey po kami, sumasali po kami sa mga group chat ng mga ganitong mga member. O kaya naman sir, gumagawa po kami ng poster. O kaya naman sir, nagtatawag po kami ng mga estudyante na qualified po sa study po namin. Halimbawa, gumawa kayo ng study related to life satisfaction of senior high school students. Okay, let's say for example, gumawa kayo ng poster na attractive doon sa mga target respondents niyo. Sigurado, sasagutan nila to kapag itong ginawa ko. So this is one of your plan para sagutin yung problema na yon. And of course, you want to have a good format ng inyong Google form o kaya standardized form ninyo. Okay? So the researcher also collects, organizes, and analyzes data related to the problem and subproblems. Okay, let's proceed with the quantitative and qualitative data. When we talk about the quantitative research involves looking at the amounts and quantities. Binibilang mo kung ilan, anong percentage, ano ang ganito mga daso of one or more variables of interest. Let's say for example, gusto mong bilangin kung ilan ba ang mga estudyante na mayroong ganitong level of extraversion. O kaya naman, gusto mong bilangin ng estudyante, ilan ba ang average ng student na mayroong introversion, let's say for example. This is what we call the quantitative data. Binibilang natin. There are numerical variables involved. Halimbawa, yung Likert scale na tinatawag natin. So quantitative research ang possible na employ natin. Halimbawa, sila ay magsasagot na agree to disagree o kaya extremely agree or extremely disagree, so on and so forth. So quantitative data, yung makuha natin, quantitative research, binibilang ilan ba ang level ng ganitong estudyante. So, napansin ninyo na mataas sila sa ganitong level, mataas yung ganitong categories. Halimbawa, 18 to 24 years old. You quantified already. Ilan ba ang 18 to 24 years old? Halimbawa, sila ay composed of the 50% of the total population. O kaya naman, binilang mo kung ilan yung 25 to 30 years old. Ngayon, nabilang mo, sila ay part ng 25% ng population ninyo. So, quantitative yun, nabibilang natin. So a quantitative researcher typically tries to measure variables in some numerical way, perhaps by using commonly accepted measures on the physical world such as ruler, o di ba? Sinong familiar dito sa ruler? Ayan. Binibilang ninyo, di ba, kung ilang inches, ilang centimeter, gaano kahaba. Let's say, for example, thermometer. O meron bang familiar sa thermometer dito? Sir, ako po, hindi po ako familiar. Ayan. Pag lumabas ka ng bahay mo, tapos pumunta ka halimbawa dito sa grocery. So thermometer agad ang bubungan sa'yo. Sir, paki-thermometer muna ang inyong body temperature. Di ba? Malalaman natin ngayon. Anong temperature mo, let's say for example. O kaya naman, yan. Ano pa ba yung mga ginagawa natin panukat? Kapag bumili tayo ng bigas, anong pinanggagamit natin? Di ba yung timbangan doon? Ilang kilo ba yan? Ayan. Tama ba ang pagkikilo mo? So this is what we call the quantitative research. Ayan. So these are things that are measurable in terms of number. Ayan. So pwede tayong gumamit ng mga test. Ayan. Bawa, meron kayong quiz mamaya. O bibilangin natin kung ilan yung tama at maling sagot ninyo. O kaya mga questionnaire. Rating scales na tinatawag. Questionnaire, halimbawa, yung ginagamit niyo sa survey form ninyo. Rating scale, you're trying to rate, halimbawa, agree to disagree, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, so on and so forth. So, ito yung mga rating scale. Halimbawa, again, you're trying to use quantitative research. Okay. Next, we also have qualitative research. When we talk about the qualitative research, it involves looking at the characteristic and quality. Okay? Kaiba ito ng quantitative research. Halimbawa, nag-interview ka. During the interview, hindi ka gumamit ng numbers. Hindi ka gumamit ng rating scale. Hindi ka nag-measure ng kung ano man doon. Basta pinakinggan mo lang siya. Tapos you're trying to know what are the substance of that conversation or that verbatim responses. Ito yung qualitative research. Let's say, for example, you will use epistemological study. You want to know the specific experiences or the original experiences or experiences of what we call this, the seafarers, let's say, for example. So, you are using the qualitative research. In-interview mo sila. Ano ba ang motivation ng mga seafarer? Bakit kahit malayo sila sa pamilya nila, gusto pa rin nilang magtrabaho? O tingin ninyo, bakit kaya? Sir, ang pagkakatingin ko po dyan, kaya po siguro kailangan nilang umalis ng bahay po nila para po magtrabaho kahit nasa delikadong lugar po sila. Kasi nasa gitna yan ng dagat, tama ba? Siguro po dahil kailangan po ng pamilya nila ng makakain. Baka kailangan po nila ng ipon. Baka kailangan po nila ng mga bagay na ito na masusustain ng pagiging marino. O kaya, anong assumptions ninyo? Bakit kaya ang mga marino, kailangan nilang pumunta ng dagat o magtrabaho ng malayo sa pamilya nila? Isipin niyo, no? Ang isang tao o ang isang ama, kailangan niyang iwanan yung mga anak niya para sa pagkita ng pera. Bakit kailangan niya yun? Yan. Kayong sumagot, kayong makakasagot niyan. Bakit kaya ginagawa ng mga ama ng tahanan na ito? O kaya naman, sino mga call center dito o may experience sa call center? Di ba, halimbawa, meron kayong night shift na tinatawag. Bakit kailangan natin magtrabaho ng gabi? Okay, so qualitatively, you want to know the reasons why these individuals try to do their night shift. No? Halimbawa, makakompromise yung health nila kasi lagi silang puyat. O kaya naman yung lifestyle nila, kumakain sila sa gabi. So, o kaya naman, hindi sila nasisinaga ng araw kasi tulog sila ng umaga. So these are the things that we want to know during the qualitative research. Possible that we want to explore their experiences through phenomenological study or through case study, through interviewing or through observation. So mapapansin ninyo, naiiyak siya during the interview na ganito talaga, gusto ko talaga magtrabaho para sa pamilya ko, para magpunan ko yung mga pangangailangan nila. Let's say, for example, ay ang pagkakaiba ng qualitative at quantitative research. Meron naman tayong tinatawag na mixed method research. When we talk about the mixed method research, many researchers collect both quantitative and qualitative data. Okay? So possible, this is the style of researchers who want to be eclectic. O, pag sinabi natin eclectic, they are using several information, several data, or several interpretation of data based on both quantitative and qualitative data. Again, anong ibig sabihin ng mixed method? Pinagsama na quantitative at qualitative data. Ayan na, lalabas yan sa quiz ninyo. So take note of that. Again, many researchers collect both of these two data. So what researcher is? Again, the researcher interprets the meaning of the data as they relate to problem and its subproblem. Okay, so you want to know what are the experiences of these marino. Diba? Gusto niyo malaman, ano ba ang problema nila? Bakit kailangan na malayo sila sa pamilya nila kahit na malayo sila, kailangan nilang magtrabaho para dito. Okay? So you want to interpret this data based on the data gathered. Diba? Gumamit kayo ng survey questionnaire. Anong tawag doon? Quantitative. Let's say, for example, pinabilang mo kanyang responses from agree to disagree, Likert scale, o kaya naman yung questionnaire na meron kayo. O kaya naman, in-interview nyo sila. So, qualitative naman ang halimbawa yun. Again, if you want to share something, if you are relating some experiences or some idea or research topic na meron kayo, no? So pwede nyo i-share dito sa ating in-call messages to be counted as your recitation. Okay? So tuloy-tuloy lang tayo. Research process, it is iterative. Okay? So a researcher sometimes needs to move back and forth between two or more steps along the way. Again, meron tayong procedures to solve a specific problem. Pag sinabi nating iterative, okay, maaring mag-step 1 ka muna. Tapos, step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. Ngayon, meron kang halimbawang problema na gusto mong sagutin ulit. So, pwede kang bumalik sa another step. Halimbawa, babalik ka ulit sa step 6, babalik ka ulit sa step 3, tapos balik ka ulit sa step 7. Ito yung iterative na tinatawag natin. Again, sometimes needs to move back and forth. Pwede kang bumalik dun sa another step kasi ang research kasi meron tayong mga variables na maaring lumabas, maaring mag-pop out along the way. Bigla na lang siyang lalabas, ay, may ganitong factor pala. And try nating investigate itong factor na ito. Okay, during the interview, let's say for example, nalaman mo na kaya ang mga marino ay dapat magtrabaho kasi para mapunan yung pangangailangan nila. Tapos, meron kang na-miss, halimbawa na research journal. Kaya pala sila nandoon kasi ito yung motivation nila. Siguro, nung bata sila, ito talaga yung gusto nilang maging. Pero ang assumption mo is that the marino is motivated by money alone o kaya sustenance of the needs of the family members. Pero siguro dahil sobrang tutok ka dun sa problema na yon, possible na bumalik ka na you want to interpret another phenomenon. Okay? So yung tinatawag halimbawa natin na motivation ng individual that he or she is also interested since childhood niya doon sa doon sa profession na yan. Pag sinabi naman natin cyclical, the final step interpretation of the data is not really the final step at all. Okay, let's say for example, there is a research which suggests that individuals who have this profession ng pagiging marino are likely motivated by money o kaya naman yung benefits, so on and so forth. Ngayon, the recommendation ng researcher is that for further study, diba? Ngayon, ikaw nagtuloy ka ng study ng researcher na to kasi gusto mo rin malaman kung talagang pera lang ba or benefit lang ba talaga ang involved sa mga target respondents na ito. Ngayon, because of the notion na merong ibang theory to explain bakit ba ang isang tao ay motivated kahit na siya ay malayo sa kanyang pamilya, may natutunan mo na it is also his motivation. Also, cyclical ang tawag doon. Nagkakaroon tayo ng cycle from this study to your study to another study and another study. Paikot lang siya to form and explore a topic. Okay? So one comes across additional problems that need solving. Siguro hindi pa na-solve ng isang study. Kaya ikaw yung magtutuloy. Tapos pag hindi mo natuloy, siguro yung isa naman magtutuloy. So cyclical ang tawag doon. So research begets more research. Kaya mapansin niyo, di ba, kapag nagbabasa tayo, halimbawa ng mga research journals, parang paulit-ulit yung sinasabi nila. Again, this is not a redundant quality or redundant quality of the research. So this is possibly cyclical na sila ay trying to support another research from one way or the other. Okay. Now let's proceed with the philosophical assumptions underlying research methodologies. We have the general assumptions. Again, we have the phenomenon under investigation is somewhat lawful and predictable. Nape-predict natin saan ba papupunta itong data natin, saan ba papupunta itong mga pinag-aaral natin. It is not comprised of completely random events. Yan, no? So again, we have the cause and effect relationship. Possible, it can account for certain patterns observed in a phenomenon. Kapag ba ang mga estudyante ay nakikinig ng rock music, sila ba ay magiging violente? O meron ba silang reaction towards affect na sila ay more likely aggressive? So possible ba na kapag sila ay nakikinig ng K-pop music, so on the so forth, or kaya yung mga pop music, less likely ba yung kanilang tendency to be aggressive? Sino yung mga nakikinig dito ng mga rock music, let's say for example? Meron ba? O kaya K-pop music. Yan. Halimbawa, nakikinig kayo ng K-pop music, di ba parang ang gaan sa pakiramdam? Let's say, for example, sa perception ko ito. O kaya naman, sir, ako po, nakikinig po ako ng rock music. Pero hindi naman po ako violent, hindi naman po ganun po yung reaction ko po, sir. So, is it it is the question of cause and effect. Kapag sinabi natin experimental, okay, again, tinanong natin anong pagkakaiba ng descriptive, correlational, and experimental method. Ito yung cause and effect na tinatawag. Ito ba yung dahilan kung bakit nagiging violente ang mga bata, yung paglalaro halimbawa ng mga video games. Di ba may mga ganong assumptions dati, no? Lumalabas sa balita na ang mga bata daw, kaya sila nagiging violente kasi napapanood nila na nagbabarilan, no? Kaya nagpapatayan doon sa GTA, o naglalaro ng GTA dito, let's say for example, mga ganyan. Ito ba yung cause, ito ba yung cause talaga ng problema? Pamilyar ba kayo sa YouTuber na sinigaw niya na subscribe to, who is this guy? PewDiePie, ganyan. So parang nag-commit siya ng massacre in a local church. Nabalitaan niyo ba yun? So ito ba talaga yung dahilan? Yung panonood niya kay PewDiePie? O kaya yung panonood niya ng mga violent games? O kaya yung panonood niya ng mga terror, mga terror videos, ano pa tawag doon? So these are the things possible na pwede maging epekto daw. So lahat ba tayo, halimbawa, nakapanood kayo ng barilan, so on and so forth, kinagaya nyo ba? Okay, tanong lang, ginaya nyo ba na makipagbarilan, okay, makipagpatayan, so on and so forth? Ginawa nyo ba? Di ba hindi naman? So possible na iba yung factor involved. Siguro hindi ito yung dahilan. Bakit ganyan yung behavior ng bata na ito? Bakit ganyan yung ginawa niya? Ganyan yung exhibit na behavior. Again, this could be explained by experimental or interventions na tinatawag natin. Let's talk about the theoretical, philosophical principles. No? Positivism. So positivists believe that with appropriate measurement, those scientists can objectively uncover absolute. Ayan, no? So hindi natin ito ma-deny. Ito talaga yung katotohanan. Na ang tao, kaya sila violente dahil nanonood sila ng mga violent games o kaya mga violent movies. So possible na sila ay positivistic point of view. Naniniwala sila with the absolute and undeniable truth. Okay? Walang makakapigil sa kanila. About the cause and effect of relationship within the physical world and human experience. Okay? Again, it is to uncover the absolute and undeniable. Ano naman ang ibig sabihin ng post-positivism? So post-positivism, objectivity in Seeking absolute truths can be an elusive goal. So although researchers might strive for objectivity in their collection of interpretation of data, they inevitably bring certain biases. So kaya siguro pinag-aaralan mo kasi naniniwala ka na yan talaga yung dahilan niya. So yung post-positivism is aware about the biases of the researcher. Siguro, kaya sinusuportahan mo yung ganitong genocide because of your belief o kaya naman yung belief ng kultura mo o kaya belief ng parents mo o kaya belief ng religious sect ninyo, let's say for example. Perhaps biases regarding the best way to measure certain variables or the most logical influences to draw from patterns within the data. Again. We also have constructivism. So constructivism, the realities researchers identify are nothing more than the human creations that can be helpful in finding subjective meanings within the data collected. So constructivists not only acknowledge that they bring certain biases. So gaya ng mga post-positivistic, ito mga constructivistic, naniniwala din sila with the biases to their research endeavors. But also try to be as upfront as possible about these biases. Nagkakaroon tayo ng synthesis. Halimbawa, naniniwala ka na ang violent movies ay nakaka-apekto sa isang estudyante o kaya sa isang manonood to have a tendency to be violent in real life. Pero itong mga constructivistic na ito, tumatanggap din sila ng criticism. Okay, halimbawa, merong mga kontra sa belief na yun. Okay, let's say for example, hindi lang naman sa panonood ng violent games yan o kaya violent movies yan. Siguro dahil sa pagpapalaki din yan ng bata. Let's say for example, kayo, sino may mga nag-aalaga ng aso dito? Di ba sabi kapag pinalaki mo yung aso na sumusunod o kaya naman pinalaki mo yung aso na mabuti, so likely rin siya, behave lang din siya. Possible na ganun yung paniniwala natin. Pero may naniniwala naman na kapag pinalo mo yung aso, kaya naman binugbog mo possible, siguro susunod din siya sa'yo. So, di ba, parang rin sila parang pareho silang tama. So, what are the effect naman ngayon doon sa behavior ng aso? So, possible na kapag meron siya nakitang ibang tao, tatahulan niya. Sa'yo lang siya mabait. Kasi binubugbog mo siya. Nakikita niya na kapag nandyan ka, kailangan mabait siya kasi unless na wala ka. Let's say, for example, maglilikot siya, iihi siya, o kaya naman tatayo siya kung saan, so on and so forth. So, iba-iba yung perspective natin. And constructivism gives us a glimpse of the synthesis of both polar of research. Merong agree and disagree. So, they are trying to synthesize this both point of view. Okay. Now, let's talk about the tools of research. Okay. So, research tool is a specific mechanism or strategy the researcher uses to collect, manipulate, or interpret the data. O, halimbawa, kayo bilang mga estudyante, ano yung mga tools ninyo para kayo makapag-aral? Sir, ako po, gumagamit po ako ng computer para po makatin po ako ng Google Meet. O, sir, ako po, gumagamit po ako ng data, ng internet, ng Wi-Fi para po makakonect sa inyo. Sir, ako po, gumagamit po ako ng microphone pag gusto ko po magsalita. Sir, ako po, gumagamit po ako ng in-call messages para makapag-recite po ako sa inyo. So, these are the tools to help you to be a student. Ano naman ang ginagamit ng mga teacher para sila makapagturo? So, likely ganun din. Ano naman ginagamit ng mga researchers? Okay, pag-usapan natin yung mga yan. To collect, manipulate, and interpret the data. So, the research methodology, on the other hand, is the general approach the researcher takes in carrying out research project. To some extent, this approach dictates the particular tools and researcher selects. Okay, magkaiba yung tool sa methodology. Kung sinabi natin tool is specific. Kapag sa methodology naman, general approach yun. General approach to be used by the researcher in order for him or her identify the characteristic of tools involved. Okay? Now let's proceed with the general tools in research. When we talk about the general tools in research, we also have the library, its resources. O, sino dito yung mga mahilig dito sa sa library? Yan. Mahilig po ako tumambay po sa library nung elementary po ako. Gustong-gusto ko po yung nagbabasa po ako ng mga storybooks o kaya din po ako nag-coloring book. Sir ako po, mahilig po ako tumambay po sa library kasi po doon po ako nakapagbasa, tahimik po doon, so on and so forth. So possible that you can have your tools in a library as a researcher. Nagets ba natin na kung saan? For a while, for a while. 10 minutes. Okay. Sorry for the interruption. Again, we have different tools. So this may include the library and its resources. You will use books, ayan, reference books, o kaya naman yung mga binabasa ninyo ng mga articles, binabasa ninyo ng mga news, o kaya ano pa ba yung mga binabasa natin sa library. So possible, these are the references na pwede natin pagkuhanan ng ating mga data, o kaya ng ating mga supporting details with the research that we want to conduct. Okay. Kayo, halimbawa, bakit kayo pumupunta ng library? Sir, para po magpalamig. Sir, para po tahimik po. Doon po ako natutulog. Meron ba dito natutulog sa library? Meron ba? Sir, ako po, nung high school po ako, madalas po kami doon ng magka-classmate po namin. Tapos doon po kami gumagawa po ng mga research project po namin. Nagbabasa po kami. Kapag po may reporting po kami, halimbawa, doon po kami pumupunta. Ayan. Anong ginagawa ninyo sa library? Di ba doon tayo naghahanap ng mga natin, ng mga i-report natin. Halimbawa, nung high school sa Serdones, no? So, halimbawa, binigyan kami ng reporting, doon kami pupunta sa library. Kasi ito lang talaga yung sources namin noon. Hindi pa gaanong uso yung internet noon, hindi pa gaanong uso yung paggamit ng computer to research. Most likely, gumagamit pa kami ng library talaga. Tapos yung references na binibigay sa amin ni teacher. Meron man tayong computer technology. When we talk about the computer technology, it has something to do with the digital copy of these references. So possible that there are researches involving the yung study o kaya naman yung mga journals, okay? O kaya yung published research in various websites. Okay, kung nababasa ninyo yung mga article, yung mga kinaka-copy-paste ninyo sa mga assignment ninyo, ayan, dyan ang gagaling yun sa computer technology na yan. Again, we also have the measurement. Ayan. When we try to measure certain variables such as demographic profile, we want to use percentage, mean, median, mode, o kaya naman yung mga central tendencies na tawag natin, yung measure of variability, yung consistency, halimbawa, Cronbach's alpha, o kaya naman Pearson's correlation, o kaya naman yung analysis of variance. We want to use this statistical measurement to interpret the data that we have gathered. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng mga ito? So, statistics may want to help us to interpret yung data na nakuha natin. Okay? We also have the language and the human mind. Okay. Let's talk about the statistics. Okay, statistics may also involve the descriptive statistic. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng descriptive statistic? So it summarizes the general nature of the data obtained. For instance, how certain measured characteristics appear to be on average. Halimbawa, gusto niyo malaman yung average ng age o kaya naman average ng mga taga-pateros o kaya average ng mga taga-UMS, average ng mga taga-EBM, so on so forth. So this is what we call the descriptive statistic. You want to know the average, you want to know the percentage, you want to know the frequency. Kung sinabi natin frequency, ilan? Okay, nabibilang, ilan talaga. So how much variability exists within a data set? Gaano kalayo ang mean sa isa't isa, let's say for example. And how closely two or more characteristics are associated with one another. Kung sinabi natin characteristic of association, ano yung sabihin nila? So for example, you are referring to correlation. Okay? So, halimbawa, gumamit kayo ng Pearson So you might likely describing the relationship between the two characteristic. Ano naman ang ibig sabihin ng inferential statistics? So inferential statistics help the researcher make decision about the data. Let's say, for example, they might help a researcher decide whether the differences observed between two experimental groups are large enough to be attributed to differing experimental interventions rather than a once-in-a-blue moon uh, event. Let's say, for example, gumawa ka ngayon ng study related to experimental method. So, pag sinabi natin experimental method, meron kang intervention, meron kang ginagalaw na variable to know kung ito ba yung epekto o ito ba yung nagiging dahilan. Bakit tumataas o bumababa yung pagiging violente ng mga estudyante, let's say for example. Yun ang tinatawag natin na independent variable. Doon sa eksperimento na yun, yung independent variable yung lagi natin minamanipulate. Okay, naunawaan ba natin? Kung sinabi natin minamanipulate natin, binabago-bago natin. Halimbawa, yung music na nakapekto daw ito, halimbawa sa affect ng isang estudyante. Nalulungkot ba siya kapag siya nakikinig ng emo music? Siya ba ay masaya kapag nakikinig ng K-pop music? Masaya ba siya kapag Pinoy pop music, so on and so forth? So ginagalaw mo yung independent variable doon. Ngayon, ano yun naman yung epekto noon sa affect? Yung affect o yung emotion na tinatawag natin, possible na ito yung dependent variable. Dumidepende yung emosyon natin sa napapakinggan natin. Nagigets ba natin? O kaya naman, dumidepende yung talino mo base sa pag-aaral na ginagawa mo. Sir, ako po, 8 hours a day po akong 8 hours a day po akong nagbabasa, nag-aaral po. Sir, ako po, 4 hours a day lang po ako nagbabasa. Sir, ako po, 2 hours lang po. Sir, ako po, hindi po talaga ako nag-aaral at all. Pero nakakapasa po ako. Let's say, for example, ganun. So you want to know the differences between the factors involved. Ngayon, gumamit ka halimbawa ng analysis of variance to compare the factors involved. With the use of analysis of variance, nagkakaroon kayo ng idea kung meron bang diferensya itong intervention A o kaya naman yung set A, set B na characteristics ng mga tao na to. So inferential statistics ang tawag doon. Okay, you want to look for the reasons bakit nagkakaroon ng epekto ang isang variable towards the other. Okay, let's talk about the words. So pagpili natin ng mga words with the research procedures, no? So words reduce the world's complexity. Halimbawa, nag-research ka tapos ang gamit mong language is English, possible na gano'n. Ngayon, kapag ka-interpret mo yung realities ng Filipino context, possible na paggamit mo ng English sa research mo, mas nauunawaan ng ibang konteksto, mas nauunawaan ng ibang tao yung ibig mo sabihin sa research mo tungkol sa mga kontekstong Pilipino. Now, words allow abstraction of the environment. And also, we have words enhance the power of thought. And lastly, words facilitate generalization and inference drawing in new situation. Okay. So what are the importance of writing? So you must identify the specific ideas you do and you do not know about the topic. Okay. You must also clarify and organize your thoughts sufficiently to communicate them to your readers. Okay. You also want to detect gaps and flaws, logical flaws in your thinking. So minsan meron tayong mga biases, meron tayong mga prejudice towards other people, and we want to explore with the use of writing. No? Kapag tayo nagsusulat, mas na-explore natin yung sarili natin, mas na-explore natin ano ba yung mga paniniwala natin. Nagkakaroon tayo ng iba't ibang point of view kasi nag-aaral tayo, kasi nagsusulat tayo, let's say for example. Okay, so here are the guidelines on how to write or to communicate. So you have to be specific and precise. You have to continually keep in mind your primary objective. So be objective with what you are doing. Let's say, for example, you want to explore the levels of the personality of this individual. So focus ka lang doon. So you have to be precise with what you are measuring. So provide an overview of what you will be talking about in upcoming pages. So let's say, for example, you will be writing research projects. So you have to orient your readers about the upcoming pages or upcoming chapters or upcoming sections in your research proposal or research project. So you have to organize your ideas in terms of the general to a very more specific. So you will be using RRL, na tinatawag na related literature. So you have to guide your readers through the discussion of these categories. And also you also want to use concrete example. Yeah. So halimbawa, during our sessions, nagbibigay ng example si Sir para mas nauunawaan natin. Ganun din sa research. Mas nauunawaan ng binabasa na mas nauunawaan ng mga nagbabasa ng research natin kung tayo ay nagbibigay ng mga example. Yeah. We also want to use figures, tables to help you more effectively present or organize your ideas and findings. And of course, at the conclusion of chapter or major section, summarize what you have said. Halimbawa, lumabas dun sa results mo, yung result, this may involve the implications as well. So you have to summarize it dun sa inyong conclusion. So you want to anticipate that you will almost certainly have to write multiple drafts. So huwag kayong mag-frustrate siguro minsan. Halimbawa kayo ay pinapa-revise ng inyong study, pinapa-revise kung ano man yung mga nilagay ninyo doon. Kasi likely, ang mga estudyante natin talagang copy-paste lang yan. Tapos ilalagay doon sa project nila, pasa. So possible na ibalik sa inyo yan. So you have to check or be sure that your final draft uses appropriate grammar and punctuation. Familiar ba kayo sa Grammarly? May gumagamit ko ng Grammarly dito. Okay, ano pag gumagamit kayo ng Google Docs, nag-automatic siya ng check ng inyong mga papers. So you will be using these things as well. Okay? So here are the guidelines or tools in word processing software. So you just have to read this one, as well as the critical thinking. So critical thinking involves the evaluation of the accuracy and credibility of worth information of lines of reasoning. So you have to think critically in terms of the involved factors in your or elements in your study. Let's say, for example, okay, verbal reasoning, meron tayong argument analysis. So understanding and evaluating the persuasive techniques. So possible that you want to know the verbal reasoning of these individuals. You want to know the argument of these philosophers or theorists. We also have probabilistic reasoning as well as decision making and hypothesis testing. When we talk about the hypothesis testing, it is judging the value of data na nakuha ninyo. Okay, let's say for example, you have gathered all of the information and you want to test your hypothesis. Tama ba ang hypothesis ko na merong relasyon ang extraversion to friendliness? Okay. So you want to judge it based on the understanding, based on your research tools, based on your materials, based on the related literature. So obtain in them and their potential relevance to certain conclusions. Okay. So when hypothesis testing includes critical thinking, it involves considering questions such as the following. So was an appropriate method used to measure a particular outcome? So you want also to know are the data and results derived from relatively large number of people, objects, or events. Okay? So nagkakaroon kasi tayo minsan ng conclusion kasi nakita lang natin sa isang tao, but it is not universally true to other people. Nagkakaroon tayong conclusion na, kapag ka-teacher, ibig sabihin yan, lahat yan terror. Kasi for example na gano'n. Is it also true with other teachers? Is it also true with other context? So have other possible explanations or conclusions been eliminated? So possible that you will rule out other conclusions or findings based on the dynamics or based on the procedures that you have undergone with your research. So can this also obtained in one situation be reasonably generalized to other situation? So, applicable din ba ito sa ibang sitwasyon or applicable din ba ito sa ibang context? So, yung result ninyo might be true to PTC respondents, but it might not be true to other respondents. So these are the things that we want to think critically. Okay, so deductive logic begins with one or more premises. No? So these premises are statements or assumptions that the researcher initially takes to be true. So you want to know, let's say, for example, in a large picture of the individuals involved in a study, what are the characteristics, so on and so forth. Now you are deducting your reasons, you are deducting the specific problems, you are reducing the problems involved, you are trying to categorize the different problems in order for you to come up with a certain conclusion. Okay. So, inductive reasoning naman, from bottom to top naman ito. Okay, so inductive reasoning, people use specific instances, okay, or meron tayong iba't ibang occurrences to draw conclusions about the entire classes of the objects or events. Okay. So as you can see right here, this is an example of the inductive reasoning. So we have several suppositions, we have several assumptions, or several hypotheses, or several beliefs about certain object or event. Let's say, for example, these things tend to connect with the rule. We tend to connect with the conclusion that we're trying to seek. Okay. Again, we also have the scientific method as we have discussed earlier. So possible that could be defined as identification of the problem. You want to know the problem as well as the hypothesis. So you want to gather all of the information involved and try to make a hypothesis and analyze and interpret the data to see whether they support the hypothesis. So this is what we call the scientific method. Okay. We also have theory building. In general, a theory is an organized body of concepts and principles intended to explain a particular phenomenon. And lastly, we have the confirmation bias. So confirmation bias suggests that we try to look for evidences for our study or certain assumptions based on our own biases. So we humans seem to be predisposed. Pag sinabi natin predisposed, we are being programmed, or it is our natural tendency to look for confirming evidence. Evidence rather than disconfirming evidence. But pag sinabi natin confirmation bias, we're trying to collect all of the data, all of the RRL related to the topic na magbibigay sa kanya ng boost to agree with the conclusion. So a phenomenon known as the confirmation bias. So, yeah. So, ang activity natin is posted in our Google Classroom. Okay. So, before we end our session for this day, may we call on the students who attended this morning session. Alright. I just have to end the recording.